Hi, my name is Ileana Costa, and I am 100% unstoppable because I've successfully broken a cycle of oppression, having overcome adversity and continuing to thrive because of it. My parents came from the Dominican Republic in search of a better life, but the struggle was definitely real. They ultimately got divorced, and my older brother and I were raised by my mom in a low income area where teenage pregnancy was pretty prevalent, and walking by a drug dealer was kind of an everyday occurrence. And I vividly remember being 12 years old and sitting in our couch or on our couch in an attic apartment that we had and just thinking this was not going to be my life. This isn't my life. And I knew then that I had to make a choice. And it was then that I chose not to become a product of my environment, but rather use my circumstance as fuel to do whatever I needed to make a better life for myself and to build a legacy. As a Dominicana, or rather, really as a woman of color, the odds can seem like they're against you. And to be honest, sometimes they are. But you have to continue to demonstrate the value that only you bring to the table. Find your own and build your own board of directors and surround yourself with people that pour into you, uplift you, and support the work that you do. I spent the last near 20 years now in advertising and technology, currently working at LinkedIn, leading a team of incredible professionals who are helping to grow our global ad tech partnerships and drive new opportunities and incremental value for our LinkedIn marketing solutions customers. Throughout the last 2 decades, I've continuously invested in myself, developed my skills, knowledge, grown my network on a global level, completed my MBA over at Cornell, and have found ways to pour into my passion of helping people of color, particularly women, by way of mentoring, coaching, leading employee resource groups, and being an active and present community member and ally. All in addition to also joining the board of the 100 Hispanic Women nearly 2 years ago. And while there have been days, and will continue to be days, where we wake up and not feel as fierce or unstoppable as others, that is just a part of the journey. We're all human, right? Remember in those moments your unique value, your worth, the gift that only you possess, and what makes you so incredibly, authentically, and unstoppable you. We are powerful together, and we can and will work together to shatter the glass ceilings that have been set for us. This is our time to take our long overdue seats at the table. And if they won't let you have a seat at the table, you go ahead and chop down your own wood and build your own table. I'm honored to be a part of this campaign for the 100 Hispanic Women National. Sharing our stories will inspire the next generation to also be 100% unstoppable. This is our time. This is my time. I am unstoppable.
Hello and welcome to, on behalf of the 100 Hispanic Women and Con Edison, we'd like to welcome you to our Latina Pay Equity event today. We are so grateful for Con Edison's sponsorship on bringing you this valuable information. For those of you that might not be familiar with our program, we were founded 25 years ago by Shirley Rodriguez Ramoniski. And soon after that, initially we started the program to support professional Latinas. But soon after, we developed a scholarship award. We started with one scholarship and we now have three. We have an annual fundraiser, so I'll ask you now to save the date. It's scheduled for September 27th. We also have a mentoring program for girls 11 to 18 that we do in collaboration with Mentoring USA and MANA. Recently, most recently, we started the 100 Hermanas travel group to give an opportunity to professional Latinas and their families to travel to different Latin American countries, but something called COVID shut us down. Please visit our website because we will have a trip planned for 2023. We also have a wellness event once a year, which has become a premier event where there's a lot of Latina representation. Our last event was last October. Our next event will be in March of 2023. I hope that you could make it. We also support policies And the policies that we support are aimed at Latino families or on supporting women in the workplace for pay equity, the very thing that we're going to be discussing this evening. And so we don't support politicians, but we do support those policies. And so we're invited in many times when they're drafting laws on the state and local government, along with the federal level. We have here a picture of our recent scholarship recipients, and we will soon be awarding this year's cohort, which will be the academic year 2021 to 2022. So there's numerous activities that you could participate in, so I urge you to become a member and consider becoming a member and joining one of our programs. We are expanding, so we have programs in the Bronx, in Long Island, in New Jersey, in Rockland, and Westchester. And we'll soon be rolling out programs in Pennsylvania, Texas, and Chicago. So consider becoming a member if you're not a member already, or join one of the existing programs, or consider being the founder of your very own. And now, with you, I leave you with Cindy, Dr. Cindy Bautista Tomas.
Everyone, thank you so much, Nancy. And it's so amazing to hear of the expansion, the explosion that's happening with the 100 Hispanic women. And so tonight, I'm really excited because I gathered some questions for you all. So my invitation is that you let us know how you're doing in the chat. If our speakers say something that resonate with you, give us some emojis, give us some words of encouragement. Definitely, we will be monitoring the chat, so we would like to have your full participation. I have a polling question for all of you viewers tonight. The first question is, women working full-time in the United States make what percentage of what men do? Is it A, 40%? Is it B, 65%? Is it C, 83%? Or is it D, 96%? Please put your letter choice in the chat boxes, and I could definitely see if you are on target with the responses. I'm checking out on Facebook. I'm checking out on YouTube. Let's take a guess. Y'all are being really shy. I see some familiar faces. Simone says 40%. The answer is actually 83%. Women working full-time in the United States make 83% of what men do, right? We have a lot of work to do. We'll have some more polling questions throughout this evening. At this time, I'm really excited to introduce to you Dr. Sofia Bautista Pertus, one of my favorite siblings. She told me to say that, so she's gonna have to give me some money. And she is a world-renowned diversity, equity, and inclusion professional, and she's a certified coach. And so she's been working for decades, working towards social justice in so many arenas. And she's here tonight to talk to us about equity. So, Sophia, please share with us all of your amazing knowledge.
Thank you, Cindy. And I am so thrilled to be here. And as Cindy said, I've been thinking about this and really studying the idea of Latina leadership for decades. And I mean that. So when I thought about this session and thinking about ending the wage gap, I say that that's one of my missions, to make sure that we as Latinas have the tools for us to think about first what we need, what we're worth, and how to value ourselves so that we can go ahead and ask for those things that we want and need, especially in our careers. And later, you're going to hear from Angelis Cordero, who's going to really give you some details about how to negotiate. But I want to start with our mindsets. And I called this session Mindset Shifts for Jefa Moves, because first we have to know that we're worth it. So I'm going to start with my story a little bit. Next slide. So a little about me. As you can see, there are many institutions you see here. Some of you might be alumni from these places. You might have worked at these places. And one thing I want to say is that my parents and Cindy's parents, obviously, instilled in us how important education was. They said, if you work hard, if you study, if you get your degrees, there's no reason why you can't get what you want. You can't achieve what you want to achieve. Here's the thing, as we went along, we realized hard work alone is not going to get us there. So as you saw, I have worked hard. Cindy and I have both achieved doctorates and worked really hard to achieve the highest degree you can get in higher education, right? So next slide. I have all my graduation pictures on this slide. So I didn't want to forget my kindergarten one, because I would say that's probably one of my most important, because I came here, next slide, from the Dominican Republic as a baby. I was not even one. And our parents had dreams for me and my siblings. My sister and I were the babies that came with my mom and my dad from Dominican Republic, where they said, okay, let's go find opportunity. Let's find a chance to give these little girls. And then they had 3 more with my other siblings. And they instilled in us, again, that hard work, that drive, and that dream of possibility, right? And many of you probably have very similar stories. Your families came here from wherever and really thought about, what do you need to do to excel? Next slide. And I would say, like, I've been through a lot, and we came from a background, a very humble background, where, you know, you see the food stamp on the right. If you've ever held one of these in your hand, I would love for you to put in the chat, yes, raise your hand. I'm very proud that my family did whatever they had to do to support us and really make sure that we valued the help that we got to move us along, because we knew that at some point we were going to give back, and that's what we're doing now. So yes, in the pictures, you see the projects, you see Yankee Stadium. Of course, I have to be a Yankee fan because I grew up in the Bronx. And again, that idea of public assistance, and how that was the foundation for us just thinking about, what do you need to move you forward for success? And that was one of the foundations. So I'm very grateful that we were able to get that. Next slide. So, and as you can see, this is a picture of my family. None of us does this alone. Many of us have many people supporting us and really cheering us on and seeing the future for us, even when we don't see it for ourselves. And I have to say, I'm so lucky that I have this in my life as a Dominicana. Next slide. So you heard some of the statistics earlier, and Cindy gave one of them about women at 83 cents for the dollar. So when you think of equal pay days, this is not a good situation. we are, as Latinas, are at the end of the dollar equal pay. So we're at 50. I think I just saw the stat the other day. We're at 52 cents, I believe, or 55 cents for the dollar that a white male would make. And my dream is for this to be a whole dollar, because like the bottom right says, we're worth the whole dollar, not just 55 cents. Next slide. So first, I'll start in terms of mindset shift. We have to think about, what are those barriers? What gets in the way of us thinking about what we deserve, thinking about how to ask for what we want? And I have a story. This next slide happened a few years ago. There was a woman who was attending school at Suffolk University, and this was in the Crown Core of Higher Education, so I'm not talking out of turn. This was someone that shared her story and said, you know, I had a paper that I wrote. I'm a scholar. I made it this far, and yet I still had this person, this professor, circle this word on my paper to say, this is not your word. And she couldn't help but think, is it because I'm Latina? What other reason would it be, right? And interestingly, around that time, it was spring of 2017, I was finishing up my dissertation. And I was so upset to know that this is the kind of stereotype that people have about us as Latinas, that I actually, when I wrote my dissertation, the last paragraph, I ended it with hence, because I was just like, you know what? No one owns this word. That's why we need to always be challenging those stereotypes and thinking and challenging the ways that we're perceived, because otherwise others will continue to see us that way. Next slide. So what are those external barriers? Back to the stereotypes. Who are we? So if you can write it in the chat, what are those stereotypes that come up? What are those things they think about us? Tiene que ser humilde. We're quiet, we're submissive, but at the same time, we're fiery, we're angry. There's so many microaggressions that come our way because of these stereotypes, and ways that we're talked to at work, at school, and in many different settings, where it starts diminishing who we think we are, and really not supporting us in our leadership. The lack of access to professional development, the lack of access to or funding for education, and maybe not even knowing how to achieve higher education. There are some schools that are just not equipped to help us. There are organizations who refuse to do the work that it takes to make sure that we are valued and that we're promoted. So they don't even have any pathway programs or pipeline programs or mentorship programs. Next slide. So that starts bringing us into our internal barriers, some of the internalized depression, and that's us not seeing for ourselves that kind of leadership that we should step right into. The lack of self-confidence, the poor self-image, too much humility sometimes, because we know we're amazing, we know we're awesome, and yet there are moments when we will not tell others about that. So I'm going to share a few different ideas on how we can overcome these things. So as we get the mindset ready, then we get the skill sets ready to ask for what we want, to interview for those positions, to go for that job. I once was told, you can't turn down a job you don't apply for. Sometimes we don't even apply. We don't even try. So if we can start working on our mindset, then I think we can work on the actual skill sets. Next slide. So who are the jefas in our lives? I know that you must have an abuela, a tia, a mommy who was a hustler, who had a side hustle, who was negotiating. No one haggled better than my mom. And I honor her. She passed away a year ago. But my mom was able to negotiate quite a few things, aside from what I showed you before, just getting public assistance to get us the help we needed to get through and eat and go to school. She also sold clothes. So she was an entrepreneur, and I never thought about that. I always think like, oh, when you're first generation, you're the first to do this, this, this. She didn't go past fifth grade, but she ran a business when we were growing up. And I think about that a lot. She negotiated with a Catholic school to get tuition for me and my siblings, much cheaper than usual. We couldn't even show people our envelope. So when people tell me, oh, I don't have any examples, there's no role models in my life of who negotiates and how to make some power moves and jefa moves, I do not believe that for a second, because there are some strong Latinas in our lives right now, and I would love for you to put in the chat who those people were for you. Next slide. So what holds us back from seeing our value? I would say it's fear. I don't want them to take away an offer, so sometimes we don't ask for more and we take that first offer. The negative image or self-worth. I'm lucky they're offering me this position. I'm lucky to just be here and have a job. No, they're lucky to have you. So why don't you go ahead and ask for more? There's sometimes lack of information. I don't know what to ask for. And later on, I'll talk about this. And I know that Angelise has some tips there too. Knowing your info is most important, and making those connections and networking. And then there's the likability trap, which there's a book that just came out by Alicia Menendez about this. And, I want them to like me. I don't want them to think that I'm cutthroat or I'm asking for too much. You have to ask for what you're worth. So when does the mind shift happen? Next slide. It happens when you think about these areas of focus. And I've been thinking about this through my coaching and a lot of different areas where I speak to Latinas and others about what do they need to do to get out of their own way. Sometimes it's, like I said, there are external issues, but sometimes it's us too, that we need to work on these things. So I think of it as your values and personal mission, developing your self-awareness, communicating your brilliance, learning how to do that, and then learning dynamic negotiation skills, asking for what you want, need, and deserve. So I'll break down these really quickly. So values and personal mission. First, you need to determine your values, because you need to know what is important to you. That's going to determine how you spend your time, who you spend your time with, and making sure that you're choosing very wisely and only surrounding yourself with people who are going to uplift you and make sure that your brilliance is recognized. Next slide. And you need to be ready to remove those toxic people and affiliations. And sometimes that might be organizations that you're a part of that are not uplifting you and not making you feel better when you walk in than when you walk out. Think about that. Think about who in your life is helping you along with your mission. What is most important to you? And identifying those sooner than later is going to make all the difference in the world of how you choose your time and how you value yourself. Next slide. Then I think about developing self-awareness. You work on your mindset by really figuring out who around me is helping me become aware of what my shortcomings are so that I can be better, so that I can improve. Be open to learning from every situation. I found this online once and I was like, this is so cool. Fail means forever acquiring important lessons. There is no failure. You can learn from every single lesson. Everything that comes your way that doesn't go well, you say, what did I learn from that? What is this trying to teach me? What can I do differently next time? Sometimes receiving feedback is no fun. You don't always want to hear the truth about what you could be improving. But remember, all feedback is a gift. And you just need to know how to ground yourself, that when you do get that feedback, that you connect to your best self and come back to yourself and say, you know what, there's a reason for this. There's a reason why someone is giving me this information. Next slide. Then when you become self-aware, then it's important to communicate it and tell everyone else what you're up to and what amazing things you've done and what your accomplishments have been. But first, you have to keep track of them. So I always say it's so important. I don't think early in my career, someone told me, you should really keep track of all your wins and all the things that you accomplish, and especially your numbers. Make sure you keep track of all the amazing things you have done for all the companies and businesses that you work for or the institutions. So I later on in my mid-career, I was like, yeah, I should have been keeping track from the beginning, but that's how you do it. Because we can't wait to be noticed. We need to grab the opportunities to brag, and we need to build our self-confidence by practicing, by getting better at our skills, by asking for feedback. Sometimes we don't always get feedback. And by improving those skills by either taking classes, professional development, reaching out to others for help. There's nothing wrong with hiring coaches, hiring speech coaches, someone that helps you along with one of the things that you need to know. And you can't communicate your brilliance unless you are brilliant. So you always have to be ready to do a good job. Next slide. And this one, like I said, Angelise is going to do a little more detail, but when it comes to dynamic negotiation skills, shifting your mindset to see yourself as worthy first and valuable and valued is going to be most important. But the other part of it is doing your research, knowing what typical salaries are, knowing in your network who is already in similar positions and asking them, how much do you make? How much did you make a year ago, 5 years ago? How much did you make when you started? You'd be surprised how many people actually tell you. And I wish that there were more and more policies like the ones recently in New York about posting salary ranges, because that's the hardest part when we just don't know. But there's a lot of ways that you can get that information yourself. And the more information you have, the more confident you will be. So it's a matter of practicing, preparing, and talking to people and networking with people to get that information and being willing to walk away sometimes if it's not going to suit you and if it's not going to value your worth. Next slide. We're all on our own journeys. So I'll start wrapping up a little bit by talking about how each of us has cycles of how we grow, how we see ourselves moving on to from one position to the next. And really, we could be in any one of these stages when it comes to being a caterpillar, still just starting out when you're entry level, going into a cocoon. And I have to say that I've been in many moments where I've been in a cocoon because I'm like, okay, what's next for me? I'm trying to think about what my career could be. I started a business, and that was part of being in a cocoon and really coming out as a butterfly blossoming and saying, wow, I didn't know I could do that. Wow, I'm doing these new things. I'm taking on new challenges and really coming out of my comfort zone. But also reaching out to other people and not being afraid to ask for people to help me. And people are so generous when you do reach out and when you do favors for other people. So no, not just using other people, but offering them something in return. So the next slide. And we can all support each other along the way. And I love this picture. When I found it, I was like, oh, it's so great to see it so representative. But that idea of network and community, and that's why I love that 100 Hispanic Women is doing this, because it's so important for us to know that we're here to support each other and look out for one another, and make sure that we're going to make sure that this pay gap is going to be gone very soon. And the more information we give each other, the more support we give each other, the faster it's going to happen. And this is one of my favorite quotes by Sonia Sotomayor. I think it's important to move people beyond just dreaming into doing. They have to be able to see that you are just like them. You made it. And I totally mean that as well. So I'm excited to be here with you all, and I look forward to the Q&A at the end, and I will turn it back over to Doctora Cindy Bautista Tomas. Cindy, I think you're muted.
Good evening. I'm so inspired by you, Doctora Sofia Pertus. Now you see why she is my favorite sister, right? And so at this time, I want to reintroduce Dr. Nancy Genova, who is the president of the 100 Hispanic Women National Board, who has so many years in the healthcare industry. And she's also an educator, and she is just a dynamo in the field. And we're so excited because she's going to share with us some facts about pay equity so that we can really sandwich the conversation, right? Sophia, Dr. Pertuz shared with us some mindsets in terms of pay equity. And now she's going to give us some facts, and then we'll have Agnelli share with us some more details. So take it away, Nancy.
Thank you, Dr. Bautista Tomas. So one of the things that we're going to look at today, let's get to the correct slide and then we could start. Okay, so pay equity, you have to understand the history of why we have wage gaps, because in order for you to negotiate and negotiate like a boss, I loved Sophia's presentation because really that's what she's teaching you, right? On how you need and how you prepare for that negotiation. We're going to explore today how you're going to reduce that pay inequality. So the gender pay gap has remained about the same in the United States for the last 15 years. So that's not really good. That means that we haven't made much progress. And in 2020, women earned about 84% of what men earn, according to the Pew Research Center analysis. Earnings for both full and part-time workers. And that was based on an estimate. It would take at least 42 extra days for a woman to earn what a man did in 2020. And this becomes even a greater wage gap when we look at Latinas. Next slide. Next slide. Here's a visual. Next slide. So again, not to belabor the point, but women earn 82 cents for every dollar, and there's more than one equal pay day. Women earn less than men in nearly all occupations, and women learn less than their same race and ethnicity counterpart at every level of educational attainment. And that's really important for our members, since the majority of our members are professional women. The pandemic has also set women's labor force participation back more than 30 years. Next slide. Even though women have increased their presence in higher paying jobs, traditionally dominated by men, such as professional and managerial positions, women as a whole continue to be overrepresented in lower paid occupations relative to their share of the workforce. This may contribute to gender differences in pay. And it's not that women are not capable, it's not that women are not credentialed, is that women are not given equal access and equal opportunity. Next slide. So some of the things that are thrown out there, like when they say about the pay gap, they say it's impacted by motherhood because you interrupt sometimes your career when you have children. And also women take off nearly twice as likely as the fathers to take time off, and that when they're having children, and that's why that also impacts their career. These are some of the things that they have studied. Roughly 1 in 5 mothers say that they have been passed over for an important assignment or a promotion at work, while 27% said they have been treated as if they weren't committed to their work. And I have to tell you, I come from a healthcare environment background. I've been an administrator in healthcare many, many years, and I hear this many times from female physicians. They're as credentialed, some of them outscored their male counterparts, and they're still passed over. Next slide. This is a slide to give you a picture, and you need to realize the Latinos are in the turquoise colored on the graph. Okay, so that means that people of color remain overrepresented in some of the lowest paying agricultural, domestic, and service vocations. Next slide. By the way, I'll make these slides available for all participants. If you like, you could just email us and we will send these slides to you. And so in terms of job losses, look at what the impact the pandemic has had on the Latino Hispanic population. on the Latinx population. This comes from the Urban Institute. Next slide. Women of color highly overrepresented in jobs that pay less than $12 an hour. And for those of us that are in New York, here the minimum wage is $15 in some areas of New York State, not in all areas. But the federal minimum wage is 11 something per hour, and that just went into effect in January of this year. Next slide. So men and women choose different careers doesn't mean that the uncontrolled pay gap is less significant than the controlled pay gap. The uncontrolled pay gap reveals the overall economic power disparity. And understand that money equals power, which is why you want to negotiate like a boss from the very, very beginning. And even if control pay gap disappeared, meaning women and men with the same qualifications were paid equally, the uncontrolled pay gap could persist if high paying positions were disproportionately accessible to men. And that's exactly what has happened. Women have not been given access or opportunities to the same positions. Next slide. So, this is very meaningful in terms of our discussion this evening because we serve the Latina population, right? So, Latinas are going to college at higher rates than ever before, but education doesn't eliminate the pay gap. In fact, you're going to earn money. You're going to earn more money than if you don't have that degree. Absolutely. But the gap is largest for Latinas with a bachelor's degree who earn 37% less than a white man on an average. Many people assume that Latinas face a pay gap because they concentrated in lower paying jobs. But you know what? That's not so. Because even with the same job, Latinas are paid less than white men. For example, Latinas nurses earn 28% less than white male nurses on the average. And Latinas tend to ask for promotions and raises at similar rates to white men, yet the broken rug still holds them back at the first critical step up to manager. For every 100 men who are promoted to manager, only 71 Latinas are promoted. So the pay gap is not really about a single paycheck, which is what is the most troublesome of all these figures that I'm giving you. Over the course of the average Latina's career, the loss of income adds up to over $1 million. And think about that in terms of generational wealth, what you're putting into your 401k or what's being matched in your 401k, how much of a distribution you will get from Social Security. You get the picture, and so on and so on and so on. Next slide. So U.S. Hispanics, and this is why this is an issue not just for Latinos. On the surface, it seems like an issue for Latinos, but in reality, it is not. It's actually an issue for everyone because Hispanics are the fastest growing of all U.S. born segment and are expected to grow 115% from 2010 to 2060. Currently, 1 out of every 4 Americans under 18 is Hispanic, and already 66,000 Hispanics are turning 18 years old every month. Not only is the Hispanic population in the United States growing, Hispanics are also younger. The median age for Hispanics in the workforce is 27 versus the median age of 37 for the U.S. workforce overall. And I'm glad to see that another Latina doctor actually compile this data, which is why we need a lot of Latinos to become Latinx community, become academics, so that you could inform your studies, because you are the expert of your community, not someone else. Next slide. So what can we do to achieve pay equity? There's clearly a lot of work to be done, but it is possible to level the playing field for working women by increasing transparency. And Sophia spoke about that around wages across the board. This is why there's a mobilization that they actually publish people's salaries, right? And disrupting this occupational segregation. So, I mean, just fact check me. Do, ask Google how many CEOs run Fortune 500 companies and see how many women you find and see how many women of color. So, expanding access to paid leave and childcare and elder care, since women are traditionally the caregivers, is is also needed in creating more good union jobs. They guarantee promotion based on years of service and experience. Next slide. So Latinas only earn about 55 cents for every dollar earned by a white male, and non-Hispanic men must work 23 months to earn what a white man earns in 12 months. But it takes a Latina almost 2 years to earn what a white man earns. The nature of low wage work and persistent gender wage gap hurt Latinas and their families, making Latinas, many of whom are single heads of household, especially vulnerable to experiencing poverty, which should not happen in the wealthiest country on earth. Okay, to the second biggest group in terms of population in the United States. Wage gaps must be understood through an intersectional lens, but awareness is only the first step. Active allyship, okay, advocacy, structural change are needed to build true equality for Latinas. So we're starting here because we want you to mobilize and be able to share this information. Next slide. Americans, by the way, are supportive of this. Okay, they see that equal play matters. All right, and their response says that items such as women not being discriminated against for their gender or women being equally represented in leadership positions. So that's already garnered support by everyone. In addition to that, there are companies that actually publish the leadership positions of the female leadership in their company because a lot of people want people to be treated fairly, and so they like to give business to companies that treat the people that work for them fairly and promote them that there is representation, diversity, inclusion, representation. Next slide. So, what happens? It's a win for the employer when the employee believes they're being rewarded fairly and they're more likely to put in extra effort. Almost 75% of Americans think that the gender gap is unfair when they know it exists, and only 16% think companies are doing enough to close it. Moreover, almost a third of workers are not applied to a company that will, this is especially true of millennials. So I applaud them because they will not apply to a company if they see that that company has gender pay discrepancy. Good for them. Next slide. So, how do you ensure that it's fair? These are some of the things that you could mobilize where you're at for your company. Audit reviews and promotions regularly to ensure that the company is not systematically rating men more highly and promoting them more quickly. Train managers so that they understand the impact of gender bias on their decision making and it doesn't skew their decision making process. Clear and consistent criteria in place to reduce bias in staffing decisions and performance reviews. Next slide. Women typically receive less feedback, and Sophia also spoke about this, and get fewer high profile assignments and have less access to mentorship and sponsorship. In a lot of corporate 500 companies in corporate America, routinely but they groom men. You have to make sure that they're grooming everyone. Ensure women in your organization have equal access to the people and the opportunities that accelerate their careers and not saddle with office housework like organizing activities and not given a place in the table. Next slide. We expect women, and this Sophia also spoke about, to be giving and collaborative. So when they advocate for themselves, we tend to see them unfavorably. We have to move beyond that. Make sure that women in your organization are actually encouraged to negotiate, and they're applauded when they do so and not penalized when they do. Next slide. So, how to help? Conduct a pay audit. Here, easy steps. Analyze compensation by gender and race so you can see and address pay gaps. Be explicit about how your organization determines compensation. Be transparent. Next slide. So these are some references for you when I send you this. And remember, I mean, you have to be willing to negotiate and you have to be willing to take the risk. And Angelis is going to go more into that, but I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite quotes by the very famous Latina author, Dr. Clarice Piccola Estes. Sometimes we don't negotiate because we're afraid, but she says, do not be afraid of failure because failure is a greater teacher than success. Enjoy the rest of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for all of that really rich information. I was taking notes and my fingers are now hurting, but I'm glad to hear that we're going to get the PowerPoint presentation. I want to see if you folks have been paying attention. So I'm going to ask you two polling questions based on what Nancy Genova has shared with us. The first question is, Latinas make blank cents on the dollar. Is it A, 25, B, 55, C, 80, or D, 10? So Latinas make blank cents on the dollar. Is it A, 25, B, 55, C, 80, or D, 10? Let's see what you folks are sharing in the chat box. I'm checking out the chat box. C. Thank you, Janine, for being brave. But the answer is B. It's 55 cents on the dollar. 55 cents on the dollar. Thank you, Janine. And so the next question is, Latinas lose how much money throughout their careers due to the pay gap? Is it A, $500,000? Is it B, $1.1 million? Is it C, $800,000? Or is it D, $900,000? This question actually makes me mad. So what is the response? Is it A, $500,000, B, $1.1 billion, C, $800,000, or D, $900,000? Yes, Dielis, one of my students, that's right, $1.1 million. So we have a lot of work to do. We need allies in the field. And with that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Anielis Cordero, who is a first-gen Latina coach, facilitator, and speaker, and she's also part of the New Jersey program of 100 Hispanic Women. I'm so excited to hear you speak today, Anielis, from Propel on Purpose Coaching. Take it away, Anielis.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bautista. And thank you, Sophia, for that wonderful presentation. Buenas noches a todas. Bienvenidas. Welcome. It's so great to be here with you all. I'm Angelis Cordero, the founder of Propel on Purpose Coaching. And I'm here to talk to you. Hold on, let me just grab my slide over here. Okay, there's so many gems on making HIFA moves and essentially how to build your portfolio of work to set you up for, having these courageous conversations. I want to coach you through the process of courageously negotiating your pay. Now, I know these are by addressing some of the fears women have around negotiating. How many of you have heard that women don't negotiate enough? Feel free to put that in the chat because I'm sure you've heard of it. You've heard this before. that women just don't negotiate enough. And it almost makes it seem as that's the reason why we have this astronomical gender wage gap. Interestingly enough, though, when given the chance, women are as likely as men to negotiate. In fact, according to research by the American Association of University Women, 51% of all Americans negotiate, and out of that 51%, women make up 47%, only 6% behind men. What's even more surprising is that even when women negotiate, men are still more likely to be successful. Women who ask get the raise only 15% of the time, while men get the increase 20% of the time. Now, that might seem like a minimal number, but that over the course of a lifetime adds up, which is why we have this atrocious wage gap. That same study by the Harvard Business Review looked at different factors like education, age, full-time versus part-time employment. And the only real differentiator is this. It's only when it's not explicitly it's not explicitly known that wages are negotiable, that men are more likely to negotiate than women. So in other words, when women don't understand, or when it's not really clear that a salary can be negotiated, that is when men have a higher propensity to negotiate than women. So I want to shift the conversation around women and negotiations to focus on those barriers that make it challenging for us women to negotiate when it's not explicit, so that when we think about negotiation, we come to the table with that mindset that it's always possible, that it's always negotiable. So let's shift that mindset. And I want to pause here to take some deep breaths, because I myself feel a little bit agitated from listening to all those stats, right? Like thinking about that, it raises my anxiety. It triggers, that mindset that, gosh, this is why we're constantly in that survival mode, because look at all of these odds that are working against us. And all of this can feel overwhelming when you're a Latina woman. So I want to pause here and let's just take some deep breaths in, because we want to shift our mindsets, but our bodies need to be tended to as well. We want to get into our bodies and make sure that the mind, body, heart, soul, all of those different factors are aligned so that we feel powerful when we're ready to make those negotiations, when we're ready to come to the table. So if you're with me, take a quick moment to just settle into your seat, roll your shoulders back, and I want to take a deep breath here. And release. Take another deep breath in. And release. One more deep breath in. And release. And I'm also showing you this because I want you to remember that breath work and getting, feeling good in your body is always available to you. So when you are getting ready to have these uncomfortable conversations, and when you're worried that you can't control the outcome because you have all of these barriers working against you, or you're afraid of getting that no, just take a couple of breaths and recenter yourself and shift your mindset from being scared and worrying about the potential outcomes to just focusing on the possibility, the power that you have, the potential that you bring to the table, all of the contributions that you've already made. So anytime those fears seep in, the breath is available to you. And I want to offer you a reframe. Instead of being afraid of even asking if the salary is negotiable, I want you to disempower the no, because many women are afraid to ask because they're worried that they're just going to get no as an answer. But if you don't ask, the answer is always a no. The worst thing they can say is no. And typically, no is not really a no. It's either a not now or not here. And all of that is just great information because it signals to you that it's either time to move forward to another organization that's going to pay you your value and make you feel worthy, or it signals to you that there is some work to be done so that you can get to that raise. So none of it is negative. It's all positive. So anytime that you're afraid of the no, remember these 3 sentences. Now, before I get into the specifics about how to negotiate your salary courageously, I want to share 3 things about me that matter to you on your career journey. The first thing is that I'm first gen, so similar to Sophia. I came to this country when I was 4 years old with my mother from the island of Cuba. If there are any Cubans listening in, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. So I'm an immigrant, first generation. I'm the first to attend college and earn a bachelor's degree and earn a master's degree, and the first to work in corporate America. I spent 4 years in the nonprofit sector. I pursued that master's degree and used that to pivot to corporate HR. And I recently transitioned to full-time entrepreneurship. I have Propel on Purpose Coaching as my full-time business. Now, the third thing and the most important thing, and why I'm here to share this information with you all, throughout my 10-year corporate career, I made multiple career changes. I worked at 2 different companies. I had over 6 different jobs, and I made various transitions and negotiated raises along the way. But I want to start with a story. I spent 4 years in the first corporate job that I had, a $1 billion wealth management company, making the same salary for 4 years, no annual raises, minimal bonus. And I just didn't know better at that point in my career because I was so new to corporate America and I had so many fears. I felt like an imposter. So in a lot of ways, I felt like I was lucky to be there. And how many of you can't relate to that? Feel free to chime in if that's something that you've experienced. So by the time the last time that I got passed over for another promotion or a raise, I had it. And luckily, life helped me. And my manager at the time served as the catalyst for me moving to another organization. And when I transitioned to that next company, I was so happy to get out of a place where I felt underpaid and undervalued that when I got the offer, which was almost $20,000 more plus a sign-on bonus, for a lateral move, I didn't even negotiate. I said yes right on the spot. I was so happy. I was like, yes, get me out of here. Oh my God, I can't believe you're going to pay me almost $20,000 more. I can't believe you're going to give me a $5,000, sign-on bonus. I really felt so grateful for that opportunity that I just accepted it. Now, how many of you have been in a similar situation where you're just so grateful for the opportunity that you take what you get? I know I'm not the only one because I hear clients and my own peers that go through this pretty often. Now, fast forward on my journey, once I got to that next $1 billion Fortune 50 financial services company, and I say that to signal to you that they have a lot of money, they can pay you more money. Once I got there, I hit the ground running. I made it my mission to get elevated quickly because I felt like I had lost time and I had lost the ability to create more equity for myself and to build that generational wealth for my family because I was being underpaid for so long. My first promotion was within 8 months, and it was a 2-level promotion, which was a wonderful opportunity, something that doesn't typically happen, right? And I don't say that to humble brag, although I have no problem, owning my success. I say that to signal to you that anything that seems impossible can be possible. So 2-level promotions are not likely in certain organizations, but if I was able to do it, I know that other people could do it too. And I did help others do the same thing. Now, although I had this wonderful title and 2-level promotion, the pay did not match. I won't get into the details of what happened or how it happened. I will just say that I did ask for a higher number, but it was too late. I had already accepted the initial number, which was a big mistake. And so the next time that I got promoted after that, 2 years later, I asked if the salary was negotiable. And I was told that there was a percentage cap and that I was already above that, even though within the salary range of that new band, I was below the starting range. So I was being promoted, but my salary was below the starting range within that band. Now, by then I had learned about ranges and knew the ballpark that my peers were making. So I made it a point to mention to my director at the time, my direct manager, that I was below the range, and I planted that seed during the performance evaluation process. Because I knew that, compensation conversations happen sometime in the fall, and they make those decisions so that come, Q1, they already have the budget for it. So I planted that seed on purpose. Sure enough, that March, I received an increase that put me within the range. But I still felt like my pay did not match the roles and responsibilities. And because I had had that 2-level promotion that didn't properly compensate me, I still felt behind. And then an interesting thing happened. Everyone on my team left. 3 internal moves, a maternity leave, 1 external leave. Suddenly, I was the veteran on the team after only being there for a year. And I had to take on additional responsibilities until they, backfilled and they hired someone to cover for my peer who I was covering for. And my director at the time hired someone to replace a different colleague, an internal employee who asked for a transition bonus. Now, again, that is not likely in this organization. You don't do transition bonus for an internal move, especially not for a lateral move. But because we were in a bind, my director at the time gave her this bonus, and she shared openly with us on the floor what those numbers were and what the range was for this person. And I realized in that moment that I was in fact being underpaid, that I was yet again making the mistake of feeling so grateful for having, been given another opportunity, another promotion so quickly, not realizing like they're not doing me a favor. Yes, somebody is advocating for me. I did have a wonderful Latina sponsor who I'm sure behind the scenes, mentioned my name around the tables that mattered, but I also worked really hard for it. So it wasn't like they were just giving me these opportunities without me being worthy of it, without me working hard to deserve them. But yet I felt grateful for the opportunity. And so even though I felt it deep down inside, like something's off, this doesn't seem to match, I still, didn't properly advocate for myself as I should have. Luckily, I was in an external leadership development program, and I met a colleague who mentored me through the process of asking for a raise. And it was the first time in my career, now we're talking like 7 years into a corporate HR career. It's almost embarrassing to admit that as an HR professional, but it was the first time in my career as a first-gen professional that I learned how to effectively negotiate, like how to crunch the numbers, how to think through the value proposition that I had and make sense of why I should be at a higher percentage in the range. And though it was totally uncomfortable to have this conversation, and because my then director had moved to another team, I actually had to go to the most senior HR business partner with this business case, with a presentation on why I should be given a raise, an off-cycle raise, which again, doesn't happen, right? I was given a slight raise, and even though it was really uncomfortable, I felt really good that I did that for myself. And once I got over the fear and learned the process, then I made it a mission to continue to advocate for myself, because I knew that I still was not caught up to what I deserved. And so when my new director came in, a white male, I made it my mission to help him understand the disparities that were happening, to be very, very vulnerable and say, hey, like, here's where I'm at, and here's why this doesn't feel really great. And you see the work that I produce, you see the contributions that I make, the mindset and the attitude in which I show up with every day, so positive and ready to be a team player. And yet I feel very deflated that my salary doesn't reflect all of those contributions and that high performance. So I formed an ally out of him, and he used his power and privilege to continue to advocate for me. And from 2019 to 2021, up until my last role before I transitioned full-time, I was able to get an increase based on my performance and an off-cycle increase to catch me up for all of the inequity that I had experienced. Now, I share this very personal story, which I haven't shared publicly, to signify to you a number of things. Here's like the pearl in my story, that you can negotiate at every step of your career journey. You should be negotiating when you get that new job offer. And there's usually room for more money. You should always come to the table and ask, is this negotiable, after done your research? And I'll go into the specifics in a moment. But know that most new job offers are negotiable. The recruiter is going to give you a number, but they likely have a range that they can play with. And so you should never accept that first number. The second pearl here is that your pay increase when you have your annual performance evaluation process should match your performance. So if you are a high performer, and I was a high performer, I was actually, my last performance rating was exceptional, top 30% of the organization. So my salary increases and my bonuses should have matched that. And my last one did. But before that, I didn't understand enough, and I was believing, some things that I had heard about the compensation process until I got the inside scoop from the people that actually knew about the compensation process. So make friends with your HR folks, and just have more candid conversations, because if we keep thinking about money as something that is taboo in the workplace, and our comp and our bonuses and all of these things, that's how we sustain the status quo. That's how they keep us in this disempowerment and this inequity, because people aren't openly talking about it. So find a work wife or a work husband that you can share, your salary with, to make sure that you are, within the range that you should be for your bands and your contributions. And then the last pearl is, your pay should be within the range whenever you get promoted. I should have never accepted that promotion that paid me below the range. And I urge you to never do the same. And they will give you the rationale like, oh, there's a cap, there's this, there's that. But I would say challenge that. I wish I would have challenged it more, because it just doesn't make sense. If organizations have a range for where you should be paid and you're getting promoted, you should be within that range. So those are my 3 pearls for you. At any given point, you can negotiate. And since I'm advocating for you to negotiate at every step of your career journey, I want to share with you 3 key steps. And I'm going to make it fun. So I want you to think of it as a wrap, R-A-P. So I'm going to teach you how to wrap. The first action that you can take is to research. And we've heard this from our previous presenters. It is so important for you to understand the market. So you start with the external benchmarking. You can use sites like Glassdoor and salary.com. It's really important for you to do an analysis of, your location, your education, your experiences, and what is the typical range for somebody with those credentials. And seeing where you are in that external marketplace, I guarantee that you're going to want to ask for more money, because you're likely underpaid, right? We saw all of the statistics. If you're a Latina woman, you're likely underpaid. So if you see what the ranges are, it will motivate you to ask for more. And then here's where a lot of people miss the mark, because we aren't given this information often. Do the internal research around the ranges for your salary bands. So depending on your title, the rank that you're in within your organization, what is the typical range? Now, some companies make that known. You can look at, the HR system, and under your title and your pay, it'll tell you. So that's some organizations. My last organization did do that. So I knew where I fell within the range. Some organizations don't do that. So I would urge you and recommend to look at the HR manual and see what the performance process says. Is it a pay for performance culture? What is the typical? They won't give you too many details, but at least it will put it into a perspective for you. And then be bold enough to ask your HR rep, your HR business partner, someone in HR who can give you at least more insights into the landscape of how it works. And what are the timelines? So if you're in corporate America, typically in the fall, Q4 is when you do your individual performance evaluation. That's when they start having the conversations around comp, because again, they have to have those pools ready for Q1. And so if you're going to advocate for yourself, you make sure that you start planting seeds while you're having that evaluation conversation with your direct manager. And in March, when those increases and those bonuses are paid out, you know that if it didn't match your performance, that's a cue. And then you can ask the question, okay, so I see this was not exactly, I'm grateful for this, but I see it wasn't exactly what was expected based on my performance. So what is it going to take for me to get to that next level, or for me to get to that next salary band, and have a candid conversation about timelines. And then, as I mentioned, have a peer conversation around comp. So I had a work wife, love her, who we've known each other before the organization where I used to work. We actually worked together in the nonprofit sector. And we have this really trusting relationship where I could openly and she could openly share numbers and evaluations and things of that sort. And she was actually the person who said to me, everybody's gone from the team. Now's a perfect time to advocate for yourself, because they need you, number one, but also like you're working really hard and that should be compensated. So there's no better time for you to ask than right now. And when she shared with me her salary, and we were on the same rank, different roles, but same rank, I knew that I was being paid less than her. And that, again, signaled to me, time to ask for more money, because this shouldn't be happening. So find a peer, and you can say something as candidly as like, hey, I think it's really important for us to have more insight and have candid conversations around pay so that we make sure that we're being paid equitably. Let me know if this is something that you're comfortable sharing, and I'm happy to share. And maybe we could be account buddies, making sure that we're both being paid equitably. The next action step that you can take, and this goes back to the wrap. There we go, is affirm. So affirming your value proposition. I want everybody listening in right now to take a moment to just list out the top contributions that you've made this year alone. It's Q1. I know that everybody listening in is a badass Latina, and you have for sure made some incredible contributions already. And if you just start listing those out, that's part of your value proposition. Never mind all of the other things that you bring to the table that have nothing to do with the work, but everything to do with your attitude, your intelligence, your education, your collaboration skills, your communication skills, your confidence. All of the things that you bring to the table are part of your value proposition, and you have to be able to affirm that, to confidently convey that as part of the reason why you deserve this raise. So affirming your value proposition. And then the hardest part, I would say, about negotiating any salary, whether it's a new job offer or a promotion or a raise, is being really clear on the numbers. So what is your floor? Your floor meaning this is the least amount that I can make. Otherwise, it's going to negatively impact my lifestyle and my ability to build generational wealth for my family. So that's something that you have to do by looking at your finances and also analyzing what is that lifestyle that you want and that you want in the longer term, not just right now. You might be sustaining your current lifestyle, but you want to continue to build that generational wealth. So what is the minimum number? And you never start the negotiation there. Right? You start above that because they're going to lowball you and you want to, at minimum, get to that floor number. Then the next thing to affirm is that relative range, meaning if this is my floor, this is the least amount that I can make, we're going to put that in the medium. Then what is less than that and what is the most that I can ask relative to my value in the market, the external benchmarking that you're going to do, and what this company pays internally. What's the relative range for this role, this rank, etc. So you have to do that analysis to make sure that you are comfortable with whatever number or percentage you're going to ask. Because when you come to the negotiation table, after walking them through your business case as to why you should be being paid more, you have to give a number or at least a percentage or a range. And I think that's where it gets really trippy, because we're not used to having those conversations and talking about money or numbers in this way, right? Sometimes that's a cultural thing, sometimes it's a gender thing, but the more comfortable that you can become with the number and the justification of the number, the easier these conversations become. So as an example, when I went to the table and said, these are all of the reasons why I deserve this raise, and here's the range. I am now at like 20% within the range, but I'm a top performer. So given my record and where I likely will be in the next 2 years, I really should be closer to the median within the range. And so this is why I'm asking for this number. I hope that story puts it into context and helps you. Finally, preparing for the pitch when you're at the table, having the conversation, being really clear on who is it that you're having this conversation with, and being aware of your audience. So how will they best listen to your business case? So if there's someone who is very direct and wants you to get to the point and get to that number, you walk them through that business justification really quickly. If there's someone who, wants to have the small talk first, and you have, different kind of relationship with them where it's a little bit more lax, then you don't want to be as direct, because then they might get turned off by that. So being very clear on who is this person, and this obviously is more so if you're doing an internal negotiation or you're up for a promotion. When it's a new salary, it's harder because they're newer. You don't know this recruiter or this new hiring manager. So in a lot of ways, that's actually easier because you can just be more direct. And then the when. So if you are asking for an internal raise or it's promotion, when are the times of the year when it's more likely to happen? So I mentioned before, typically off-cycle promotions and off-cycle raises are not common because organizations stick to their performance process, right? But depending on who you're asking, their level of influence and authority and power, that might not matter. Depending on the organization, maybe they have 2 times a year when they promote. So the point is, being very clear on having that information will help you know when to prepare for this pitch and how to prepare for this pitch. And then practice talking through the number justification. That is the hardest part. You can sometimes be very good about, advocating for yourself because your body of work and your contributions, but putting a number to that, depending on the work that you do, can be difficult. But when possible, try to quantify it. Try to see what this work, adds this much to the bottom line, or, impacts this many people, so that it helps to justify the number. And then talking through that justification is going to be really helpful. And then aligning on next steps. You want to be clear on what are the potential outcomes. So you ask for the new salary, whether that's a job offer, an internal increase, or a promotion. And then hopefully the other person will be the one giving you that timeline and saying, okay, let me circle back within a day or two, or, I have to raise it to so-and-so and I'll get back to you in a couple of days. But sometimes they don't. And it's a very open, conversation. And you don't want to kind of leave things lingering like that. You want to walk away from the negotiation table being really clear on what to expect next. So you're going to hear back in 1 to 2 days. And, the other thing to think through is, if I get a no, if they don't accept this proposal, then what am I going to do next? And I want to talk through those potential outcomes. Whenever you negotiate, and this goes back to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you want to shoot for a win-win situation. Win-win. So you get your raise and they get to continue to have you being a great performer for their organization. That is the win-win situation. But no is a possibility. So if they say no, there's 2 options here. you can stay, and then you're in a win-lose situation because you didn't get the salary that you wanted, that you know that you deserved. So if you choose to stay, you have to either be prepared to feel a certain type of way, knowing, hey, they didn't give me what I think I deserve, and that might then impact your performance. It might impact, how you show up at work. Or you have a conversation that's very candid to say, okay, so it's a no now. What's it going to take to get to a yes? What's the timeline? What are the things that I need to do? And I had one of those conversations before my last promotion, when, I got my performance evaluation, and it was good, but it wasn't what I expected given the contributions I had made. And I asked that question. I was like, what's it going to take for me to be rated this? And then how long do you think it'll take for me to get to that next level? Because, I need to understand what that timeline, because then I have a decision to make. And that is a bold move, but you have to be confident that you do have options, because you do. You have so many options. So be prepared to potentially get a no. And it's if it's a win-lose, you might experience the things that I just mentioned. You should also be prepared to walk away. And that's also win-win, because they don't keep you and you didn't get what you want. So you're losing in that sense. But you're winning because you didn't stay at a place that makes you feel underpaid and undervalued. So that is the best win-win situation if you get a no, and there is no clear timeline. There are no clear steps on what's going to get you to that next level, to that next pay band. Because the thing is, as you heard earlier, we can't afford not to make these money moves. And you do need to remember that you have options. Many people stay, myself included, because we don't think that we have those options, because we worry that changing companies might feel like starting all over. But I want to share with you some stats to help you normalize making career money moves. There are 11 million job openings in the USA today. 11 million. And employees who leave their companies for a new job in their field of expertise often make a 20 to 50% pay increase. So if you think starting over is going to be hard, what's going to be worse is staying and being underpaid and losing all of that equity. And, we're leaving what was it, millions of dollars over the table. So you can't allow the fear to stop you from making that career money move. The other thing that most people don't know is that the average American worker has 12 jobs throughout their lifetime. So I hear this from clients all the time, like, oh, it feels like starting over, but you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from a ton of experiences, from a great network that you've hopefully built throughout your career. And so it should be easier for you to get that next opportunity, even if it's something totally different. So you're starting somewhere else, but you're not starting from scratch. And people do this often. 12 jobs throughout their lifetime is the stat. And then finally, US workers have an average tenure of about 4.1 years with a single employer. So long gone are the days when you worked for a single organization for 10, 20, 25, 30 years. You actually lose a lot of money by staying at a company for too long. So let's normalize making career money moves. And if you don't believe me, I want to share 3 quick examples of personal clients of mine who've made these moves. They've made an internal move, an external move, and one who leaped to entrepreneurship as a way to make more money. So my one client, Joel, first generation man, within 1 year, he increased his salary more than he ever thought possible just by getting over the fear of asking, which I coached him through. And he was able to make an internal transition where he received, a promotion, made a lot more money within a year and a half, within a year. His former colleague, Jackie, was able to not only get a 10% pay increase moving from one organization to the other, she actually was able to work for an organization that allowed her to work 100% remote, which gave her the opportunity to move back to the West Coast and be with her family, which was something that she really needed because she was a new mom. And then finally, my client Ilion, who is a friend of mine from college, worked in education for 12 years. And although that career served its purpose for her, she got to a point where it was no longer fulfilling. It was very stressful, as you can imagine, after the pandemic, during the pandemic, being in education. She wanted to be more creative, have more freedom and flexibility with her time and her ability to earn for her family, because she was recently married, about to be a mom. And so she took the leap. And she was so scared about the financial implications of it. But when she did, she actually started making more money as a consultant and having a side business as an event planner. And now that she has her luscious little baby, she doesn't have to worry about, having just a couple of weeks off and having to head back to work afterwards, because she has this freedom and flexibility that she wanted. So saying all that to say that you too can propel on purpose, you can make these career money moves. You just have to, I know that it's hard, and I know because I shared my stories with you. I know how hard it can be, but it's not only possible, it's what you need to do in order to get to equity. So for anyone who's interested in any of my services, if you use Latina Pay Equity code when you sign up for any of my services, you'll get a discount. And feel free to follow me on Propel on Purpose, on Instagram, my website, and of course on LinkedIn. I want to thank you for your engagement. And I am so happy that I had the opportunity to chat with you all tonight.
Thank you so much, Angelis, for all of your really informative information. The chat box was going crazy. So you definitely want to take a look when you have an opportunity. So before we start the Q&A, I have one more polling question for all of you. Which fields have the smallest pay gaps for women? Is it A, food workers, B, social workers, C, pharmacists, or D, all of the above? So which fields have the smallest pay gaps for women? Let's see what's going on in the chat box. Let's see. Come on, y'all. Let me hear from y'all. Let's see here. I don't see anyone chatting away. I think there's a delay. But the answer is D, all of the above. So all of you that said D, you are accurate. It is all of the above. I see there's a lot of D's going down the line. Excellent, excellent. And so right at this time, I'm so happy to introduce Nancy Ruffin, who is also a premier coach, has worked in the healthcare industry for decades, and she is going to lead the panel discussion for both Dr. Sofia Pertuz and Angelis. So take it away, Nancy.
Thank you, Doctora Bautista Tomas. Good evening, everyone. I hope that you guys are enjoying this conference. There has been so much great information shared. I hope that you've had your pens and pad right by your side taking notes, because these are really great tips that you can take with you throughout your career. Before I begin our Q&A session, I want to share a short video that speaks to a lot of the work that we do here at the 100 Hispanic Women.
The 100 Hispanic Women National Inc. started 2019 with a bang as it celebrated its annual scholarship award ceremony at the Graduate Center of the City of New York, located in Midtown Manhattan. Nancy Genova, president of 100 Hispanic Women, spoke to us about the organization's origins and described the type of students that the organization supports.
We've been around for 23 years. I was recruited by the founder of the organization, Shirley Rodriguez Ramanesky. Our students represent many Latin American countries, from South America, and also from the Caribbean.
The ceremony was a celebration of the organization's programs as awards were presented to recipients from the Young Latinas Leadership Institute, the 100 Hispanic Women Graduate Fellowship, and the Shirley Rodriguez Romanesky Public Policy and Administration Scholarship Program in honor of the founder. Recipients of the Shirley Rodriguez Romanesky Public Policy and Administration Scholarship, Arlene Almonte, shared her appreciation for being one of the recipients of the award and how the founder's story inspired her.
Women can put themselves in very powerful positions and change stuff. And when we band together, we're able to accomplish that. So I feel the founder was very strong in accomplishing that.
As a nonprofit and nonpartisan women's organization, 100 Hispanic Women National Inc. is committed to guiding Latinas towards excellence through educational enrichment by creating opportunities to build personal and professional connections that benefit them. Scholarship recipient Rosa Caloso and keynote speaker Cindy Bautista Thomas elocuted how important these connections to the organization have been to their professional and personal development.
They come from similar backgrounds as me, but they also come from different field experiences that can intersect with what I do, and also connect me to other people that they may know. And also, it's in many ways a sisterhood.
Being a part of 100 Hispanic Women for me has been transformational. As an Afro-Latina, I've had very limited exposure to Latina women in power and have had influence.
100 Hispanic Women's relationship continues to thrive and remain strong with the CUNY college system. However, it is their intent and their vision to continue and further outreach to the New York metropolitan area's other colleges and universities. For more information, please visit their website at www.100hispanicwomen.org. Reporting for BronxNet, Stephen Powell.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that short video, and I hope that you learned a little bit more about our organization. We are really passionate about education because we recognize that education really is the key that unlocks that door and that really allows us to demand the salaries that we are worth. And so now we're going to head into the Q&A portion of this conference. And I'm really excited because we've seen presentations on mindset for Jefa moves. We saw Nancy Genova discuss the current pay equity issues that many women of color are facing. And then Angelise came through and she shared some incredible tips on helping us to negotiate those salaries. So now for this portion, I want us to talk about owning your equity, knowing your value, and demanding your worth. So I'm really excited to be in conversation with Dr. Sophia, Nancy Genova, and Angelise. Where's Dr. Sophia? There she is. Ladies, excellent presentations. So I want to kick this off with the first question of the night. And this question is for Nancy G. We've heard a little bit about the importance of negotiating the first salary, right? So for the young woman that is coming out of college who may not have much experience in the corporate world, how would she determine her value or worth in negotiating that first salary? What are some tips that you can share for someone that's just entering the workforce?
So for a student, a person that just graduated that's entering the workforce, very important to have done internships. Okay, because the internship is the experience. Sometimes people don't like to do internships because you don't traditionally earn money, but what you're earning is so much more because you're gleaming information. And sometimes when you're an intern, this is an interesting fact. When you're an intern, sometimes you have access to upper echelons of an organization that if you actually worked in that organization, you would never have access to those people. So you need to get in there, you need to do the internship, and that's how you position yourself in the negotiation. You have to do research what the entry-level job positions are in that area, how much you should be earning, and you should walk in there with like a whole list of everything that you've done. One of the things that we promote a lot now are e-portfolios, where you actually show if you've done volunteer work, you show flyers that you've created, you show little videos, if you block all kinds of things that will take your competition out of the water. You become more marketable than the next recently graduated college senior. And that's what you want to do.
I love that. I think that one of the things that you mentioned that it's important to kind of reiterate is also the importance of establishing relationships, right? When you're in these internships, and as you mentioned, that sometimes you have access to these upper echelon, sometimes they're senior executives at corporations, being able to establish a rapport with these individuals will really help to set you up and kind of propel you into that space where you can demand or you can, negotiate a better starting salary. So thank you for sharing that. This next question is for Doctora Sofia. What advice do you have for Latinas that currently find themselves in the process of negotiating their pay?
Well, it depends on the context. If you are trying to advocate for yourself at your current place and they are not budging and are not trying to find that number that feels comfortable for you, there are moments when you need to leave. And I think Anjali's talked about this, that idea of taking risks and knowing your worth. And some of the moments, and I'll share an example for me. I was once in one position and I really tried hard to negotiate. So I saw my value. I knew what I was doing. I was doing more than anybody at my level. And it was so clear to the whole institution. And I don't want to say where I was, but basically I knew my worth. So when I tried to come to the table and say, here's what I think I should get, let's talk about also my title change, because sometimes one title gets you to the next. So those are the kinds of things to negotiate for. And at the time, I got the answer basically like, Sophia, I know you aspire to do great things, but as a woman and a mother, you should really appreciate this flexibility you have in this job. And I got this whole like runaround about how it's just, we don't have that much money in the budget right now, and on and on. And I just smiled. And that's the day I polished up my resume and started getting ready to go. And I was like, I work so hard here. You know how hard I work. I've won awards here. Like I've done so much. And guess what? By the next year, I had a job that not only was I making double what I was making before, I also had a place to live that went with it. So it was one of those moments where I was like afraid, you're comfortable. I was there for 5 years. I was there a long time, but there are moments when, there's an expression, if respect is no longer being served, you need to leave the table. And I was scared at first, but guess what? I left that table, and the table that I went to next was plentiful and set me up a new mindset of what is next. And I did it again, and I did it again. So I think if you're willing to take that risk, you have to know your numbers. You already got the info. I'm not going to reiterate all those details of how to do it and what to have as your research, but I do want to reiterate, you have to know for yourself what you're willing to put up with and what you can work towards so that you can prepare yourself for another move if that's what was right for you at the time.
Yes.
So that's my advice.
I think that you really, what you're saying is that you knew what you were worth. You knew what your value was, and you recognized that they weren't matching what that was. And so I think being confident in knowing what you bring to the table has to be enough. I know sometimes, especially for women, if we have a family, even more so if you're a single mom, it may not always be as easy to walk away, from the organization. So one thing I would add is that maybe you can't walk away on the spot, right? But I would say start preparing an exit strategy, right? Give yourself a time frame where you're going to start looking for other employment, get all of your ducks in a row. And then when the time comes and you get that offer, you say, sayonara, peace, see you later. Good to know you, but it's time to move on. So thank you for sharing that, Sophia. The next question is for Angelise. And because you have the HR experience, because this is your area of expertise, I want to talk to you a little bit about HR departments, because we know that really salaries are established with human resources, right? So even me as a manager, I am constantly fighting with my HR department because they don't like to budge a lot of times with, the salary ranges. So what can human resources departments and leaders start doing to close this wage gap that we're experiencing?
Thank you. Love this question as a HR professional. It's complex because it depends on the organization. So in some organizations, it's really not HR. We're just the scapegoat. It's the business who controls the budgets, and they use the HR policies and the HR business partner as the gatekeeper that says, like, oh, we can't do it because HR says we can't do it. So don't believe everything you hear about HR, number one. But if that is in fact the case, because there are organizations where they follow certain protocols as it relates to compensation because they're trying to be more equitable. So they don't want to, have somebody give exceptions to somebody and then not for another person. That can get dicey. And so they try to be true to form to whatever policies they have set in place. But I also know as an HR professional is that all of those policies, all of those rules, there's an exception for all of them. And so what leaders can do is influence and challenge and push, because if you have a top performer who is being underpaid, that's unacceptable. And so you have to push and you have to advocate for that person, as my former director did for me. And, he had the battles. He used his power and his privilege to say, like, I know what you're saying. You're saying she's within the range, but it doesn't seem that way based on like these different things. And so if you're in a position of power, definitely use your seat at the table to advocate for those who deserve it. Because if not, recognize that people have options, especially in this environment. It's currently an employee's market. And so if you don't pay people accordingly, if you don't show them that they are valued, they have options and they can go and make 10, 20, 50% more somewhere else. And a lot of organizations, as a result of the pandemic, but also organizations typically are not really great at workforce planning. That's going to hurt. That's going to hurt because they probably don't have an immediate backfill. And so there's this delicate dance that you have to do with your employer, where you certainly want to be appreciative of the opportunities and, show up with a great positive attitude no matter what, because that's your brand and your value, right? And your work. And you want to be proud of that, but also making sure that they understand that you have options and you can take your talents elsewhere. The other thing I'll say for any HR professional, regardless of what your title is in an organization, and especially for those who are HR professionals of color, because you have a seat at the table, because you understand some of these inequities personally or from your network, regardless of where you sit in the organization, take the opportunity to challenge your own peers. I certainly did that. So, when I was a manager of leadership development programs and I looked at the salaries and I knew what, their peers were making in other organizations, because I do a ton of volunteer work with first generation students, and I knew what, the other banks were paying. I brought that information back and said, look, this doesn't make sense. We're told by compensation that these folks are making good money, but relative to the market, we're going to lose really great talent if we don't start paying them more. And I was able to get my associates a raise in 2020. It was like the peak of the pandemic, because I pushed, and then it took a while, but finally was able to make that happen. So forget about the titles. At any level of the organization, you have the ability to influence and to push for change if you come to the table with all of the right research, the data, and the intention. Like, you're not just doing it for, to hear yourself speak. You're doing it for a purpose, to, have that equity, to make sure that people are being paid and are being valued.
Thank you. Excellent, excellent points. And the next question I'm going to pose to all three of you. We can start with Nancy G. Then Sophia can answer, and then you, Angelise. If you could go back to when you first began your career, what would you tell your younger self? Nancy G.
I think what I would tell my younger self is that I really needed to do much more research when it came to the evolution of what you should be going through in the workplace. It's the research and the steps that are required, in terms of salary ranges, in terms of experience, and in terms of really knowing it's, that's a cash phrase, right? Knowing your worth. But in reality, it really is. Can you imagine being the manager that did not give Sophia that adjustment? That manager should be demoted because it shows lack of insight and lack of understanding what the organization needs that would allow such a vital employee to walk away. So you need to do the research, and then in that research understand exactly the value that you're bringing. And I didn't know that when I was a younger woman. I just didn't know that. And I one person that put a comment was that they haven't said anything because they feel grateful. And I remember feeling like that. I remember feeling grateful for my job, that I had an okay salary with okay benefits. But it's beyond that, because that salary needed to compensate me at the highest level, because that's what I brought to the table.
Love that. Thank you, Nancy. Sophia, how about you? If you can go back to when you first began your career, what would you tell your younger self?
First, I would tell myself, never accept the first offer. Having been a manager that has made offers, I always keep an extra 5 to 10,000 or percentages in the vault. And people, time and time again, just take the first offer. And I've been there. So once I knew what I knew, I was like, you never do that. Always go back and ask for more. The other thing I would have told my youngest self is I would have kept track of all of my contributions. There were so many programs that I started, initiatives that I did. Some of them still live in some of the places where I've worked. So I now know better to kind of keep track. And I have gone back to really try to figure all those things out, working with a coach, trying to just really talk about my career story in a really well accomplished way beyond the tasks. Oh, I opened my email, I had my meetings, I did this, I did that. No, I started a program that won awards. I left behind a program that helped with retention and helped with students feeling like they belong. So, like, telling those stories and really bringing them to life when you're looking for that next opportunity, or even when you're talking to folks about what you're doing and if they're promoting you in any way. So that's what I would have told myself, to be better at keeping track of that and feeling good about it and taking ownership over it, and not just going, we all did this. You know what? There are some things you did and you did it, and you should take pride in it and be ready to talk about it in the future, because that's going to be your career path story. So that's what I would have told myself.
Love, love, love that. Thank you. And Angelise, how about you? What would you tell your younger self?
Whew, so much. The thing that always comes to mind, though, is, we live in a society where we live to work as opposed to work to live. And so being first gen and having to navigate college by myself, or, being the first to navigate that, I wouldn't say that I did it completely by myself. I definitely had a support system, but I just didn't really know what my options were. And I was thinking, oh, I want to make a difference. I want to help people. So I went the nonprofit route, not realizing that's not going to support the lifestyle that I want for myself. So instead of thinking about what's the job that you want, think about what's the life that you want to lead, and then go find the job that's going to support that in the short term and then in the long term. And at any juncture of your career journey, you should be thinking of it in those terms of what's the lifestyle that I want to lead? What are the contributions that I want to make? What's the impact that I want to have? And then going to find the job, the career that's going to support that, not the other way around. Because as it relates to money, the mistakes that I made were, the job, I really, find alignment with the values of this organization, or I really like the job. But the pay wasn't there to match the lifestyle that I wanted. And so I accepted less than what I was worth. And, I made it work. I made the lifestyle work to support the job that I had, as opposed to the other way around, which is like a nuanced way of thinking about it. But that's the first thing that I would say to my younger self.
I absolutely love that response, because I think what's important to remember is that every position that we're in should be preparing us for that next level in our career. So you have to be mindful, of the positions that you're accepting, and not just the salary, but how is this job going to really take you to that next level in your career. And it's actually whenever I'm interviewing individuals, it's one of the questions that I ask, because I want to make sure that that the job is aligned with their career path, because I'm looking to grow leaders like that. It's always about developing the next generation. And so I want to make sure that I'm bringing in the right people that are not just going to be passionate about the job, but they're going to be there and they're going to want to learn, and they're going to take what they're doing and apply it as they move throughout their career. So ladies, thank you so much for your transparency and your candidness with your responses. I know that you have provided so much valuable information to all of the attendees and even myself. We're always continuously learning. So at this time, this concludes the Q&A portion of the conference. I want to remind everyone who is watching, we have a slide that's going to be going up shortly. There's a QR code on it. We invite you to use your camera to scan the code, and please complete our survey. This is the feedback that we are going to use as we continue to prepare more programming for you and for the members of our organization. We hope that you have enjoyed this evening's conference. And if you have, and you're not yet a member of our organization, we invite you to head over to our website at the100hispanicwomen.org and become a member today. And with that, I will send it back to our president to kind of close us out. Nancy Genova, take it away.
We thank you again for participating this evening. This has been such valuable information. I hope you took notes. I hope it will be recorded. We will broadcast it again. So we will send out a blast of when we will be showing it again on Facebook Live. It will also be available on YouTube. Again, consider becoming a member and support all our programs. Feel free. There's going to be information on how you contact us at the end, and we will have those slides to you. And now we're going to leave you with a tribute to our founder, Shirley Rodriguez Ramaniski. Have a great evening, and thank you so much for sharing this time with us.
Shirley Rodriguez Ramaniski was born in the Bronx in 1938 to parents Providencia O'Neill and Armando Rodriguez. She was a smart, kind, and beautiful girl who grew to lead a remarkable life filled with service to the public and her family. She was a woman who consistently gave back to her community and made an effort to help others.
I admired her greatly simply because her initial reaction was to serve others, to do good for the community, and not to expect anything in return. And what I did get from her more than anything else is that every day you go out into the world and you try and do your best, and you leave this world better than when you found it.
Shirley's accomplishments included creating and directing the first social services unit in the Bronx Borough President's Office under the leadership of Germán Badillo and his successor, Robert Abrams. In 1971, she became the district administrator for U.S. Congressman Badillo, managing and coordinating operations between New York City and Washington, D.C. Subsequently, Shirley became assistant deputy mayor for affirmative action, intergovernmental relations, and community development in the South Bronx, Harlem, and other underdeveloped areas in New York City under the Koch administration. Shirley went on to become the legislative coordinator for the South Bronx Development Organization, headed by urban planner Edward J. Logg. She helped secure federal funding to create the South Bronx Job Corps Center, land revitalization projects, and named the South Bronx an empowerment zone in order to support private business development and housing assistance to community-based organizations. In 1986, she assumed the position of executive director to Governor Mario Cuomo's Office for Hispanic Affairs, where she initiated the Puerto Rico Exchange of Officials program. She initiated the Hispanic Mentoring Program in partnership with the New York City Board of Education, private employers, and the New York City Governor's Office. During this time, she served as a delegate to the White House Conference on Libraries and Informational Services to help author the 1988 Hispanic National Agenda. From 1993 to 2002, Shirley served as Deputy Commissioner and Equal Employment Opportunity Officer for the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development for the Giuliani administration. Returning to New York State service in 2002, Governor Pataki appointed her as Senior Vice President at the Empire State Development Corporation's Economic Development Division.
She's had quite an illustrious career. She was a formidable public servant, and she served with great distinction and honor, and she worked very hard for the public good.
In 1996, Shirley founded the 100 Hispanic Women, Inc. with a group of dynamic and professional Latina women committed to empowering other Latinas through scholarship and mentoring programs while helping them network and maximize opportunities in government and corporate America.
Shirley was one of those women that believed in helping other women, and the way that the organization was started, and we gathered in her living room in the Bronx, in Riverdale, and that's where the 100 Hispanic Women was formed. We talked about what is it that we want to do, how do we want to do it, and at the time, back then, there was a lot of interest in what was going on in the Hispanic community, especially with Latinas, so it was a perfect time to start the organization. Today, we're 22 years later, and we have all kinds of programs that were founded by the organization.
Now in its 22nd year, 100 Hispanic Women is still a thriving and growing organization, providing promising scholars with scholarships and mentoring support annually.
Shirley had the vision to make an organization that would give them access and maximize their opportunities so that they would learn how to network with each other and develop opportunities for each other. And that's exactly what happened. It was a local organization. It just became a national organization about 4 years ago. And so now what we want to do is spread and be able to replicate everything that we've done in New York to other states, follow the same model, to network, to give scholarships. We also do an annual wellness conference where women come and they do meditation and yoga, and there's top speakers, national speakers that are authors, all Latinas, because for many professional Latinas, they never see representation. And so when they go to these events, one of the things that they come away with is that there's no one that speaks, directly to them. And so they wanted people that understand the things that they've gone through and also the evolution for them. And so that's what we provide for our members and for those that participate in our events.
We have many thousands of women and young women who have gone through scholarships, who have been part of most of our programs.
In 2008, Shirley continued her pursuit to help young girls by becoming heavily involved in the establishment of the Bronx Global Learning Institute for Girls, the Shirley Rodriguez Remeneski School.
All of the young ladies are bilingual, so they all speak Spanish and English because the curriculum is bilingual, and all of the young ladies also have to be enriched with music and art in the school. And the school is an award-winning school, and it's doing very well.
Shirley also served on numerous boards, among them as chair of the Bronx Lebanon Hospital, currently Bronx Care Hospital Center, the advisory board for the Metropolitan Museum's Multicultural Audience Development Committee, and the Hostos Community College Foundation Board. Overall, Shirley made sure that everything she did echoed the concerns of women and all of her fellow Bronxites, paving the way for great change.
We are so proud of the legacy that Shirley Rodriguez Romaneski left for us, and she's truly a Bronxite. Shirley has lived her life, loved the Bronx, and she will always be remembered as a Bronxite.
She was just such a fabulous friend. She was a great mother. She was a great sister and a real visionary. Always thought about helping others.
The lifetime of work that Shirley has done is for everybody, men and women in the Latino community, and all women, regardless of their race and ethnicity, is to know her name, because Shirley Rodriguez Romaneski mobilized housing, she mobilized policies, she mobilized medical resources to the community. And for some people, one lifetime, you get to do one of those things. And she did all of those things, and she made it look like it was easy when it was not. And so what she has done is really remarkable. Her career is remarkable. She is remarkable. And our mission is to ensure that no one ever forgets Shirley Rodriguez Romaneski.
In recognition of her tireless efforts, Shirley became the recipient of countless awards. As an exceptional Latina, she will continue to be regarded as an outstanding human being with exemplary vision and the drive to serve others by giving without expectation of receiving. In January 2019, at 81, Shirley passed away surrounded by her family. She is survived by her 2 children, Michelle Romaneski-Koch and Frankie Romaneski, 7 grandchildren, and a great-grandchild. Today, the 100 Hispanic women posthumously honor their founder, Shirley Rodriguez Romaneski, with the Latina Legend Award.
"100 Hispanic Women would like to thank you for your generosity and support. Also, Con Edison for being an amazing sponsor. Thank you and good night."